You're listening to the Tony Kinnett Cast on 93 WYPC.
WCYTV
Here on the Daily Signal.
Good evening and welcome to the Tony Kinnett Cast here on the Daily Signal, nationally syndicated first on 93 WIBC. We've got a lot to dig into, but first and foremost, Pam Bondi, the Attorney General of the United States, has released a statement on the Minnesota fraud investigations, which are now, I mean, if you can list the number of active fraud investigations of an entire state on not just one, but multiple pages of a spreadsheet document, you have a serious problem in that state. You need libraries, you need entire filing systems now to dig through the emerging fraud in Minneapolis. And now, Kristi Noem, the director, the secretary of the Department of Homeland Security, has ordered a series of what are being called raids by some officials in the Department of Homeland Security. Some are saying it's really just agents that are walking around. There's a lot that is currently in process with various federal agencies in Minneapolis, St. Paul, the broader Twin Cities area. And of course, when it comes to a broader action by the Department of Homeland Security, there comes a little bit of media coverage that they produce themselves. This is from the Department of Homeland Security this afternoon. So you have the music, Minneapolis, and then federal agents who are going into what appear to be convenience stores with weird back rooms. So I will point out, by the way, I'm a huge fan of federal agents actually going through Minneapolis and talking to some of these individuals. We're going to explain what it is they're doing and why. I will say, to the meme masters, to the excellent editing folk over at the Department of Homeland Security, really like drop the bass halfway between, like rock and dubstep with just guys walking. Those of you who are listening to the podcast or listening on the radio, you're probably imagining people getting tackled and thrown to the ground and like police cars rolling up, like skidding across the road like they do in Home Alone 2, Lost in New York. No, these are just like, they're just walking. Just talking. And they're like, this is the stuff. They're walking and they're asking questions. By the way, which is good. But music really should match the thing. What are they actually doing? What's really going on? Well, here's one of those clips actually with the audio. And it does show some very damning things. In any case, there are a series of Somali daycare centers or organizations that are listing themselves as childcare in order to receive federal funding, all the way from the Biden COVID special loan program of fun and wonderfulness, all the way to modern state and federal grants that Tim Walz has encouraged in the state. And the really, really weird part is that the owners of these organizations, these daycares and businesses, seem to know nothing at all about running a daycare or children or a business or anything. They're just, taking your money.
We're watching from Homeland Security Investigations. Okay.
So when you look a little bit closer,
No. Mobile dimension is the location, is where everybody comes.
so here is one of the particular individuals, one of the owners, one of the Somali owners of one of the daycares that is, again, we're going to get into Nick Shirley's investigation, been a very big part of this particular series of fraud escapades. He's being asked by Homeland Security how the business operates. And he says, well, we give the address to everyone and to the government. They give us money.
Any subcontractors or anything you guys deal with?
He's saying, so is there anyone that, you guys hire in order to build or to clean, to make sure that the organization meets code, that you're using in order to feed the kids, that you're using in order to provide some kind of health services, which some are attached to?
Say like other businesses that you partner with, that you use for a service of any kind, maybe transportation or anything like that?
No. We provide, usually parents, they come like this, drop the kids, they go to work, and then we take care of them.
Awesome. And who actually oversees the receipt of those documents?
Usually,
All right, so essentially what you've got are a series of questions that go into asking about how any business operates. But the series of questions that are getting answers are really, really weird answers. So there are answers that, well, I don't really know anyone else that does anything. It's just me. and we don't really provide any services, but we kind of watch the kids. We don't really have any evidence that we've ever watched the children. We don't actually have any receipts of the children having an eye kept on. We don't actually have anything of substance, but I'm just here, collecting money. Now, this brings us to Nick Shirley's investigation, because right now, the Immigration Customs Enforcement wing of the Department of Homeland Security is not the only federal agency that is in Minneapolis. There are several groups that are now kind of converging on the city, several investigations. As Attorney General Pam Bondi put it just over an hour ago, quote, Nick Shirley's work has helped us show Americans the scale of fraud in Tim Walz, Minnesota. The DOJ has been investigating this for months. So far, we have charged 98 individuals, 85 of Somali descent. You'll notice how that number continues to climb. Remember before it was just, 70 guys and 60 of them were Somali. And then it was, 70 something are Somali. Now we're up to 85. And more than 60 have been found guilty in court. She then tries to set the stage. We have more prosecutions coming. Buckle up, lawmakers. And then she just talks about the various Somali migrant scams in Minneapolis and Minnesota, kind of at scale. So the Feeding Our Future COVID-19 fraud case, all the way over to juror bribery, because the blind justice system is nothing if not ready to accept a little bit of the old greenbacks behind the alley. Then autism treatment Medicaid schemes, Medicaid fraud, and now daycare fraud. And there are all kinds of various state level and federal level fraud, because believe it or not, very different kinds of crimes associated when you steal from your friends and neighbors at the local level versus stealing from federal grant programs through the non-governmental organization and nonprofit apparatus. Here's where things get a little bit awkward. Right now, from what I can tell, this organization that has been, this community that has set up various organizations around Minneapolis, around Minnesota, this community had not a single time thrown out a tip to investigators, to police, to city councilmen, to the state government, to the federal government, all of the people in the Minnesota Somali community who are supposedly very wonderful backbone of America kind of people, as has been said multiple times. Not one time do we have any record that a Somali migrant into the United States submitted a tip on any of these kinds of fraud. Any of them whatsoever. And, to make this just overtly and abundantly clear, before we even get to the daycare fraud, we now have convicted or financially exposed fraud regarding Somali charities, restaurants, convenience stores, political campaigns, the justice system through judicial and juror bribery, grant programs, housing facilities, medical programs, and then, of course, Nick Shirley's investigation into the Quality Luring Center, not Quality Learning Center. There is an organization, I should say, in Minneapolis that is supposed to be called the Quality Learning Center, only they spelled it wrong. Because, of course. It's one of the many, and I mean many in the hundreds of Somali migrant-owned childcare facilities. Now, this organization, before we even get to Nick Shirley, took out $108,000 in the PPP loans in 2020, and then $106,000 in a separate loan in April of 2021. Both of these were fully forgiven by the Biden administration through all of their magical loan forgiveness stimulus. So, in case you were curious, before we even get to whether or not children are in this daycare or there's anything shady going on, they're already cashing in huge direct federal dollar checks before we even get to the NGO and grant fraud. Now, this does bring us over to Nick Shirley's coverage. We're going to send the radio crew over to commercial. We're going to continue on the live stream. It's the Tony Kinnett Cast here on the Daily Signal. Now, Nick Shirley is an excellent independent journalist and YouTuber. He's been known for quite a while for kind of on-the-ground reporting, conservative-leaning style reporting. He released a 42-minute video after a prior TikTok had gone viral on December 26th. And the title was, "I investigated Minnesota's billion-dollar fraud scandal." And we have a small clip of the investigation. But what Nick Shirley did is he walked around with a cameraman and another individual to various supposed listed daycare and childcare facilities and simply said, "Hey, we noticed that everything's all closed up, blocked up, but you're receiving all of this money. What's the deal?"
Children here in your child care?
Which child care, ma'am? Is a lot of
Minnesota Child Care right here. It's from the state of Minnesota's website. We're just wondering where the children are.
Where the children are?
Yeah, where are the children? It says you have 102 children here,
Okay.
and you got $2.66 million this year in funding.
So they're outside a weird kind of like industrial complex style building. One of the various kind of commercial properties that you or anyone can purchase or rent. And they show up and there is a lady that answers the door in a burqa. And they're saying, "Hey, we've noticed you're all locked up. You know, there's nobody here, nothing going on. But on the record, according to the government documents, that you're receiving money right now for millions and millions of dollars. You're supposed to have all these kids. Where are the kids?" And she goes, "Children? Kids? I've never heard of such a thing."
And $2.5 million last year. We're just wondering where the kids are.
And who are you?
My name's Nick Shirley.
Nick Shirley.
And where are you? Where is?
You'll notice you don't hear one of the most classic, typical, normal signs that you're near a daycare in this video, which is the shouts, the screams, the cheers of children. None of that. And you know, before you say, "Well, maybe they're out on Christmas break," I don't know how many Somali migrant children are out here experiencing the joys of the baby in Bethlehem.
Which department? That is harassment.
Oh, we are from
So another one comes up and says, "That is harassment."
ourselves.
Yeah.
Hello, we'd like to ask where the money's going. Look at that.
So he does a little flashy edit there. It speeds up them. They shut the door and they lock it, and then the lights all go dim. This happened multiple times throughout the investigation. He went all over Minneapolis and into St. Paul to find these daycare centers that supposedly have all of these children. And it just so happens, here's the Quality Luring Center. No children, nothing at all.
Learning wrong.
Don't open up!
How do you have ice here, ma'am? I'm literally a YouTuber.
Don't open up!
Ma'am, what do you...
Now we have the defenders of the Somali migrant fraud. These are my favorite individuals throughout this entire investigation. Like every other white liberal who has nothing to do, which is every white liberal in Minneapolis, they have now shown up, they have swooped in and announced boldly, gracefully, not to open up. By the way, she's yelling to those inside an empty building, no one at all inside, that ICE is here. Yes, two dudes with a camera. Yes, that's ICE.
Think about the fraud that's taking place here in Minnesota.
Don't open up! We have ice!
And what do you think about this place being licensed for 99 children
Don't open up!
and getting $4 million
Don't
over
open
the
up! It's ice!
$4 million in the last 2 years?
I love it. It really paints a beautiful picture, doesn't it? You have, of course, the people that are trying to figure out what on earth is going on. And then you have the angry Karen who doesn't want to admit that she's wrong and instead walks around screaming nonsensically. It's really, quite a beautiful thing. Now we have to bring the radio crew back from commercial. So don't go anywhere. We're going to get into this and the reaction to it. And it's even worse since this investigation came out, and getting worse all the time, not to mention in Washington State and in Ohio. Don't go anywhere. It's the Tony Kinnett Cast here on the Daily Signal, nationally syndicated first on 93 WIBC.
It's the Tony Kinnett Cast on 93 WIBC.
Shirley claimed that in Minneapolis alone, his team identified over $110 million in suspicious payments to similar daycare sites to the Quality Luring Center in a single day of visits. Now, there are many out there right now that are digging through their own localities and states' funds. There are various websites that you can look through. We're going to get to that a little bit because people are already finding some very questionable things in Washington state and Ohio, in which there are businesses that are claiming to be doing all kinds of things. There are businesses all over that are taking state and federal dollars proudly, excitedly. In fact, they have entire candidates running on bragging over how many dollars they are giving to various migrants. Here was Tim Walz just a couple of years ago talking about how proud he was to have all of these migrants coming into Minnesota who were taking all of these tax dollars.
We're a state of immigrants that values that. We have more refugees per capita than any other state. That's not just morally a good thing. It's our economic and cultural future.
Okay, now that's quite a statement. That was in 2022. They are our economic future. The economic future of Minnesota is to be defrauded at the state and federal level. So you pay lots and lots of taxes to individuals who will then take that money and then send it back to Somalia overtly, directly, unabashedly to the terror network Al-Shabaab. And again, they're very, very open. They're proud of it. They have no issue saying that they're for Somalia and not the United States. And by the way, in doing so, what do you get when you actually have individuals that start to ask questions about what's going on in Minnesota, what's going on in Washington state or in Ohio, or what is going on at the other various kinds of migrant level fraud that we have seen from communities around this country? Well, what you end up getting is Governor Tim Walz asserting that anyone asking any questions at all, that's white supremacy. How dare, it's racist to ask why this daycare center taking a bunch of federal money and, cashing in those COVID forgiveness loans. Well, that's just, only racists would ask any questions about that.
So this is what happens when your own federal government wages war against you. This is what happens when they target communities for their own benefit. This is what happens when they scapegoat. And
it's a scapegoat. Scapegoat. Okay. So the American people right now, judging by the polling data, judging by the administration, are aggravated with the Somali community who came into the United States that did not follow the typical immigration process that others did, who waited in line and then became citizens of the United States. Migrants that came into the country that were given state and federally funded housing, state and federally funded food, state federally funded cell phones that Tim Walz signed driver's license universality for, that are now being revealed to commit billions of dollars in fraud that his own state legislature's auditor was screaming about, that state level employees were calling for. He says that's a scapegoat. How dare you question the Somali community, the same Somali community that never once gave any kind of a tip that any of this fraud was going on.
this is what happens when they no longer hide the idea of white supremacy. When you,
I'm going to be honest with you guys. This may be the first time that I found out that Somali is a race. I didn't know that. I mean, yeah, you remember singing it as a kid. Red and yellow, black and Somali. There's a lot of fraud, gosh golly. Come on, you just got to remember your nursery rhyme. Somali's been erased for all of, since Tampon Tim said he was friends with school shooters.
You hear the Vice President of the United States talk about now white people won't have to apologize for being white. That's never happened once in my whole damn life.
He has literally apologized for having white skin multiple times on camera to an active press, meaning that multiple sources recorded it and then published it. Tim Walz whines about liking mayonnaise too much, which is a racial stereotype. Again, not a harmful one that's pretty funny. But, the idea that because you say, hey, maybe you shouldn't come from Somalia and then give money back to Somalia. Hey, I'm going to let you in on a little secret. You know how many of those migrants that Trump brought in, the refugees from South Africa, you know how many of those have been embroiled in any kind of a fraud case? Zero. Just saying, if you come here into this country and you steal lots of money from the state, from the federal level, via NGO grants and all other various kinds of infrastructure that we're going to talk about here in a second, you need to leave. You need to be shipped out of the country. And by the way, if you're an American citizen who is an immigrant and you come to this country and then you become a citizen and then you participate in these kinds of fraud, you should be denaturalized. Your citizenship should be revoked and you should be sent back. Now, how is the media covering this? They're not. They're not. We do this thing for the top news in 10 where we review the Sunday shows. The Sunday shows are like podcasts for those of a bygone cable news era, in which they would have a Sunday special where they'd bring in all of the big and powerful people that people are probably talking about, not really, and then they would give you their opinion on the big news of the day. And I'm not joking. When I was sitting down researching, looking through the top news in 10 for Sunday, all of the Sunday shows, from CBS Face the Nation to CNN State of the Union, all of it was AI. None of it was what is now, without a doubt, the biggest fraud scheme in this country's history, and it's not even close. The Teapot Dome scandals have nothing on the Minnesota Somali migrant fraud scandals. Now, it would be a little unfair of me to suggest that, nobody's talking about it. From the Hill, MAGA World, which is another word for Republicans, zeroes in on Minnesota over fraud scandal. There you go. You got Republicans Pounce, ladies and gentlemen. It took all of about 13 and a half, days. They tried to ignore it as long as they could. And then when the entire country, including a lot of the local affiliate networks, are even asking questions, when KARE 11 up in Minnesota starts demanding answers, you've screwed the pooch. You're going to have to cover this in the media level. So you've got the Hill out there. Oh, those Republicans, they're pouncing. They're zeroing in. They're seizing. Excellent. My favorite, though, is from MSNBC or MS Now. They are now suggesting that this is really, really bad. Why? Because Donald Trump or something.
So absolutely, it should be investigated. The question is, why is this a priority in a different kind of way?
A priority in a different kind of way. Gee, there could be $10 to $18 billion in fraud going on. Well, why would anyone spend an outsized amount of attention on that? Can't we all just say that people need more Obamacare money and call it a day?
The politicization of the DOJ and the FBI is undeniable. So whether they are reliable narrators is the big question. And this is what happens when you weaponize and politicize federal agencies that are not meant to be, politicized. And
so I actually do agree with her on that sentence. This is what happens when you politicize federal agencies. Because I'm going to let you in on a little secret, guys. The government's political. It is. Politics, the idea of discussing and implementing policy, happens at the governmental level. That's true. Now, how did we keep the United States federal government and the executive branch as apolitical as possible? By limiting the amount of power that branch had. And Congress was supposed to keep a tight leash on it, but we don't do that anymore. So federal agencies are inherently political. Do you know how I know this? Because they staff the secretaries and departments with people of political parties. Because political parties base their values on a series of things that are called planks, or things that they believe. So if the Trump administration is appointing a bunch of people who are super duper pro-abortion to the Department of Health and Human Services, it ruffles some conservative feathers. If the Trump administration appoints a realist to head the Department of Energy, Republicans and conservatives are rather pleased about this. It's not rocket science. By the way, you're going to appoint someone to NASA. You should probably know something about rocket science. And if a Republican appoints a Republican, this is not an excuse for ignoring the Minnesota fraud. Radio crew will catch you guys in a second. We're going to continue over on the live stream. It's the Tony Kinnett Cast.
I think the American people are right to ask the question, well, can we trust you? And that's a sad thing to say as an American. Let's recall, too, that there's also other scandals in other states. For example, the Mississippi welfare scandal. And this is not unique to politics. Americans know that. But
and Americans should get a Mississippi welfare scandal, which is a really funny way of going, well, the white people are doing it, too. Guys, I'm going to let you in on a little bit of a secret. If you commit fraud in the United States, you should be arrested. Whether or not you commit mortgage fraud and you're, some kind of congresswoman or a member of the Federal Reserve Board, or whether you are regular Joe Schmo or Jahal Mahim from Somalia. However, if you come from Somalia to the United States and you are found committing lots of fraud, you should be shipped back. Because if you agree to come to this country, you should agree to play by a series of rules. Now, the most common media reflection to this is to go after Nick Shirley, which is really weird. So Fox has covered this, of course, unsurprisingly. Jessica Tarlov made the weird decision, though, in contrast to a lot of the hosts, to suggest there's no way that Nick Shirley could have found this out on his own. After all, he doesn't have the Ivy League journalism degrees that allow you to write articles about why being a lesbian fish is important.
Nick Shirley's reporting there's no way that this kid walking around uncovered $100 million worth of fraud on his own.
Or maybe the people running the luring center aren't bright enough to hide their fraud very well. I know. I too am amazed that someone who can't spell the word learning may not have the prowess necessary to keep all of that good, fraudulent behavior swept under the rug. If it was really difficult for Al Capone, who was a very brilliant mobster, to keep all of his financial activities swept under the rug, I gotta tell you, the man who's serving the dirt and bean combo on 32nd Street in South Minneapolis, he's probably not batting 1,000 on the, financial expertise. But it does bring a really interesting question here. Why wasn't this reported on earlier? It was. It absolutely was. And I want to make this clear. This has been an organization, the Quality Luring Center, has allegedly been investigated more than 12 times by Minnesota's Department of Human Services between 2019 and 2023. 95 different violations, and yet it still received over $8 million. So explain something to me. Why do you get to stay open for eternity? Because Somalis are the backbone of our community, of course. Here's that investigation, by the way.
I started by visiting Quality Learning Center Daycare. So it is that 14B. Which sits right in the heart of downtown Minneapolis. Between 2019 and 2023, the Minnesota Department of Human Services found 95 violations at this location. They range from failure to keep hazardous items away from children to no records for 16 children, which include things like immunizations, emergency contacts, and medical needs.
Now, wait a minute. Those nice Department of Homeland Security agents at the very beginning of the show, they were asking people, hey, who keeps the receipts for all of these things? Wouldn't you know it? No one's keeping receipts for these things. Now, hang on a second. No one's keeping the paper records for fraud. Oh my gosh. I'm starting to think that there might be significant voter fraud in Minneapolis. We're going to talk about that here in just a second. Don't go anywhere. We're going to bring the radio crew back. It's the Tony Kinnett Cast here on the Daily Signal.
You're listening to the Tony Kinnett Cast on 93 WIBC.
Now, while the soy boy influencers over on social media, those on the left, immediately started saying, and I'm not joking, they were really upset about this daycare fraud scandal because it gave Republicans something to rightly be mad about. So essentially, there are two takes from a lot of the liberals who are, doing the classic screaming and yelling and, wearing red gowns and white hats. The essential two arguments on the left boil down to, I don't care because at least they were defrauding something everyone needs, like childcare. We're going to get to that with Zohran Mamdani here in just a minute. Or, I really don't like that Republicans were right. That one's my favorite. That one is my absolute favorite. Because it just so happens that if you come from a country or you come from a culture, you were raised in a culture, no matter what color you are, you were raised in a culture in which those around you participated in an honor culture, in which whether or not you were viewed as being important was more important to you, was more valuable to you than doing the right or wrong thing. It turns out that that'll, gives you an excuse to commit lots of fraud and take everything for yourself and distribute it back to those who you want to think you are important. But alas, this is going on in other states because people saw this investigation coming out after Christmas and started saying, I wonder if it's happening here. And oh boy, howdy is it. So one individual over on social media is making a lot of waves. Her name is Kristen Mag, because she discovered there are 539 childcare centers in Washington state that list Somali as their primary language. These businesses operating in the United States that someone from the Department of Health and Human Services, the Department of Child Services, might need to speak to upon concerns of sexual assault, malnutrition, neglect. You think the federal and the state governments are staffing a bunch of agents in these departments that speak Somali? I'm going to tell you the answer to that, no. When I was the science coordinator at Indianapolis Public Schools, I spoke more fluent Spanish than anyone in our English as a second language department. And I showed up to one teacher whose specialty was also speaking Spanish, only to find out that over half of her students spoke Arabic. It was at Arsenal Tech High School, by the way, in case anyone was wondering. And they just, just throw kids in there. Who cares? I mean, after all, diversity and equity and inclusion, screw everybody else. That's the attitude. And in Washington state, by the way, I'm really not joking with you here. There are all of these various daycare centers, 539 of them, that list Somali as their primary language, but that's not really the big issue. That's not really the big issue. Over 10% of the child care centers in Washington list Somali as the primary language. Most, of course, are concentrated in the Seattle, Tacoma, Western Washington region. But here's where things get a little sticky. The majority of these list no business operating address, and a good portion of them, from what I'm seeing, over 1/3 of them, are 24 hours. Now, I don't know if I would consider it wise to drop your kid off at a 24-hour daycare center and casino and an opium farm. Probably not the best thing to do. But I would say that should throw a little bit of a red flag up. So when you have all of these officials that are running for re-election, and I'm not talking about just Congress, I'm talking about in your state governments, and they're talking about how important it is to have all of these state employees, and, oh man, if we start pulling funding, then who's going to actually do the investigating? You're telling me no one has investigated this? Of course not. Because all government officials in these departments that are supposed to be investigating, you might have one or two that are actually out there beating the pavement doing some investigating. The rest of them are sitting in their offices and, like Kamala Harris when she was vice president, playing solitaire all day, doing nothing whatsoever. In fact, they're scrolling on social media and leaving snarky tweets instead of doing their job. Now, from the first 41 seconds of the video that I just scrolled on screen of these organizations, over $1 million has been distributed to those that scrolled by your screen between July and October of this year alone. These organizations that are founded by Somali migrants are set up and then immediately start accepting millions and millions of state and federal dollars under all of these wonderful grant programs. Now that brings us over to what's going on in New York City. Because you may remember a particular election in which Zohran Mamdani won on the argument, the persuading call, the selling ticket of affordability. And what was he going to make affordability? Everything, because he was just going to throw money at it. That's right. You know what? You don't have to pay to ride the bus. Universal bus care. You don't have to pay to have someone watch your kids. Universal child care. You don't have to pay to get groceries. Universal grocery care. It's all here. It's free. It's wonderful. And one of the things that he was proposing was a system for any individual to just charge New York City, or realistically, because New York City can't just raise taxes all by itself, New York State. You're allowed to just write a little bill of sale to the state and get money for your childcare operating practice. Now, I can't think of anything in the country that's gone on in the last couple of months and years that might give average, ordinary, everyday tax-paying Americans a little bit of pause about such a policy, because do you really think that Zohran Mamdani, along with the young Palestinian activists that he's appointing to his transition team and serial domestic abusers and other kinds of really concerning transition team members that, of course, he's asking you to donate to because he doesn't have any money. You think he's going to go through and vet every single dollar that's going out in these grant proposals? My graduate partner at Ball State University once got an entire study approved for prophylactics for cow udders. And no, it wasn't medicinal. It was just rubber stamped. Because that's how a lot of the grant approval process at the federal level works in this country. Now, for Zohran Mamdani, the stopgap that a lot of Americans were relying on, well, yes, he's mayor, but he's going to realize he can't really do anything because Kathy Hochul, she's not a radical Democrat. She's a white liberal woman, and we all know how mentally stable liberal white women are in this country. Kathy Hochul has now caved. According to Carl Campanelli over at the New York Post, on December 28th, Kathy Hochul has now thrown her weight behind Mamdani's multi-billion-dollar universal childcare plan. On 77 WABC on Sunday, she thinks he's going to surprise a lot of people, give him a chance. She doesn't say how or with what money or from whom these dollars are going to be provided. No, he's just going to snap his fingers and then presto, universal super duper childcare for everybody. Amazing. By the way, his current plan his proposal to pay for the $6 billion no-cost childcare for every New Yorker aged 6 weeks to 5 years by raising taxes on corporations who were totally going to stay in New York City for this, wink, and boosting incomes on the top 1% of income earners. He says that generates an estimated $9 billion combined. I'm going to let everyone in on a little bit of secret here. If you seriously think that corporations are going to stay headquartered or with a lot of their assets in New York City instead of going to a burgeoning financial hotspot like Dallas, you're on crack. Also, some of the people that will be running these daycares will also be on crack. This, in fact, is going to be an incredible way of stimulating the economy in New York City to buy more crack, which is another one of the issues, by the way, in Minneapolis. According to an individual at the drug enforcement agencies, cracks me up. We now believe that a major portion of the drug finances, they're talking about illegal illicit substance finance, in Minneapolis and the surrounding areas are coming from non-governmental organization fraud. So not only are you paying for the Al-Shabaab terror network in Minneapolis, not only are you paying for the highs of the various wonderful, diverse migrant communities that come into the United States and then say they swear eternal allegiance to Somalia and maybe they married their brother to get in here, who knows? You're also going to pay for it in every other major blue city around the country, because what could possibly be more American than that? Beautiful. I'm telling you guys. And by the way, there is something to be said here for what average, ordinary Americans can do, which is hold those who are running for re-election in 2026 to the fire during primary season. An announcement from the Attorney General that there's going to be consequences. I have heard that one before. And when I'm told there are federal raids going on and I pull up the video and it's guys walking around just talking to people, having a nice chat and a cup of coffee, I got to tell you, I'm a little bit suspicious. So what needs to occur are some individuals thrown behind bars, denaturalized, deported. But that does, in fact, remain to be seen. We're going to talk a little bit more about this regarding Ohio here in a second. Live stream crew, radio crew, you guys have to head to commercial. It's the Tony Kinnett Cast. Now, let's talk a little bit more about the uncovered information in Ohio as well as in Washington State, because Andy No, formerly over at the Post Millennial, has shared quite a bit on these Somali care centers that were donating to the political campaign of Washington State Somali Democrat and BLM activist Ubax Gardhere. You're saying, who in the world is Ubax Gardhere? Oh, she's the one that back in 2010 did that wonderful little routine making an Islamic bomb hoax on a school bus full of children.
Excuse me?
Sure.
You can't drive, you can't leave.
So this lady, this Ubax, she hijacks a bus and tells everyone she has a bomb. Back in 2010. And these Somali care centers, daycare centers for adults and children of all and no ages, you know, maybe you're one of those that are just completely empty and you're just schmoozing off on the coin here. They donated a lot of money to get her out of legal trouble for this. Excellent. So your tax dollars are funding for the literal legal defense of actual terrorists. Not just abroad, Al-Shabaab we already knew about, but here at home. It's exciting stuff. What an exciting time to be around. In Ohio, not much better. Right now, federal forces are starting to comb through several of the major cities in Ohio. Columbus and their city council made the interesting decision to just openly violate federal law. They posted a message online alerting illegals that ICE was in the city, urged them to stay indoors and avoid ICE. They've affirmed that Columbus police will not be cooperating with ICE. They're an inclusive city. Yeah, you can't do that. That's very illegal. And now we have individuals from Immigration Customs Enforcement tackling those who are illegal and also, you know, violating federal law in Columbus, Ohio. There are also now individuals who are requesting documents on individuals from Haiti and Somalia who are operating businesses in the United States. And I very much am looking forward to this. I'm looking forward to this. Because what we are already starting to find are all of these postings on whether or not the Ohio Department of Children and Youth has listed certain childcare organizations as compliant. Because if you get too many strikes, it's kind of like a healthcare violation, a health code violation you have to shut down. They've already found a Better Choice Childcare that has been partially or non-compliant on everything from medical statements to building code operation since 2012. Something that would get your business or my business shut down in a heartbeat. I had to practically strangle half of the building officials in our home county to get the studio built. Well, actually, only just one. One of them was really great. That's one of the reasons why we got the building permitted. But if you come from another country, you can just ignore all of the rules, whether you're in the Midwest, whether you're on the coasts, whether you're in the Great Plains, and then you can just open up whatever business and receive all of these federal and state dollars because, hey, after all, diversity, equity, and inclusion, and you came from somewhere that's like a really bad place or whatever. Which is an interesting argument, to say the least. We got to bring the radio crew back one more time from commercial. When we get back, we're going to talk about something I have been saving all Christmas just for you. It's the Tony Kinnett Cast here on the Daily Signal.
This is the Tony Kinnett Cast on 93 WIBC.
So, while migrant communities from Somalia are sending your tax dollars at the state level, sorry, if you're in Minnesota, you're getting like the double or the triple whammy. You're paying oodles and canoodles and toaster strudels worth of dollars to send this stuff back. Which, by the way, I should mention just because it's quite hilarious. Tim Walz did tweet back in 2023, childcare providers didn't take this job to get rich, but they sure as heck didn't take an oath of poverty. We're providing direct funding to boost pay for childcare providers and building a strong childcare system for middle-class families across the state. I do deeply enjoy tweets that age like milk. While your tax dollars were going to fund Al-Shabaab, the terror network in, Somalia, or Hamas in the Middle East, or the Houthis, or Al-Qaeda, directly from the United States coffers in some cases, there are those who are very, very, very upset that the United States might give the middle finger to a couple terror organizations. So first and foremost, I do want to point out the 30th kinetic strike on narco-terror boats in the Southern Caribbean has just occurred. So we've hit the big 3-0. A huge congratulations to United States Southern Command and all of those boats that they promoted to submarine. Excellent stuff. Our condolences to the fish who are currently overdosing on fentanyl. Moving on. I do want to point out that the Trump administration's choice to hit ISIS in Nigeria over Christmas, of course. ISIS, several other radical Islamic groups were carrying out a genocide, are still in the process of carrying out a genocide in Nigeria. The Trump administration lobbed a couple of beautiful rockets and missiles over into the suspected regions and camps that were housing a lot of individuals in the ISIS and the Islamic State movement. That has upset a lot of people on the left, but also a few on like the weirdly populist conspiracy theory right. Because look, you and I are very well aware that you're going to have individuals like Ilhan Omar, who anytime at all, there's some type of Islamic terror attack, they're going to get out there and say, well, the real problem is the Islamophobia. The real problem is not this horrible, brutal Islamic terror attack. It's really the Islamophobia. That used to just be like a squad thing. You'd even have some members of the more kind of corporate left, like the Elizabeth Warren-y, Hillary Clinton-y, Joe Biden-y sort, that would kind of flirt with saying, well, yes, Islamic terror is bad, but also Islamophobia is bad. Then you have your Ilhan Omars and your AOCs, the squad members, who would argue passionately that, no, we won't say anything about the terror attacks. We will only say some people did something. And then also Islamophobia is very bad. There is now a wing of, I'm not even going to call them the right because Tucker Carlson has no beliefs at this point that are congruent at all with the right. And Marjorie Taylor Greene, whose entire brand now is just being a nutcase and I guess kissing up to MSNBC and CNN, hoping for a job after she leaves Congress. They are now complaining about the Trump administration being mean to Venezuela and being mean to radical Islam. Not joking. That was what some individuals spent their Christmas holidays doing. So, for example, on December 22nd, Marjorie Taylor Greene sent this out. Here are some interesting facts about Venezuela that are easily searchable. Venezuela is a predominantly Catholic country. No, it's not. No, it's not anymore. Nope. Socialism, Maduro has outlawed the practice of honoring Catholicism in the country of Venezuela. That is BS. But when your brain has been replaced with hot oatmeal, anything can happen. With very strong laws against abortion, with the exception being the life of the mother, Maduro has been critical of Israel, calling it a genocide in Gaza and against Zionism. So there's her big argument. So Marjorie Taylor Greene took to the stage to say Trump should let the narco-terrorist boats go free and stop being mean to the socialist because it's illegal to have abortions in Venezuela. Now I'm going to let you in on a little secret. Some of the worst places on earth where people are routinely beaten and sold into slavery, like in Venezuela, yeah, they outlaw abortions. That doesn't make it a good place. I don't know who out there really needs to hear that except the one wearing a colander as a hat. And that might make that kind of obvious to you. Just because someone out there says you're not allowed to have an abortion or claim to be socially conservative, that doesn't make the country naturally wonderful. That's not how that works. Now, the real issue of stupidity here would be Tucker. Tucker Carlson over Christmas did an interview with American Conservative magazine, which has just lost the plot in and of itself. And Tucker gives an impassioned plea right after he got off the stage at Turning Point USA and lectured the Turning Point USA crowd that they were too Islamophobic, which is a wild move. Tucker then announces that there has been no Islamic terror in the United States for 24 years. 24 years. What was 25 years ago? I'll let you think on that for a second. Here's Tucker going all in.
TPUSA did a poll during AmFest, or I guess it was after AmFest, and they asked the audience, what they considered to be the greatest threat to America. And they did put radical Islam at number one. I'm wondering where you think those sentiments are coming from. I mean, I've heard you say before that this is an op and that we all know which foreign government it's actually coming from. Which government is it? And can you explain how that operation works? How is it, kind of lured into those?
I love this so much. First of all, that is a soft butt-kissing question. So we all know that you think it's Israel. Can you explain why you think it's Israel? And also, Just tell us why you're right and wonderful, sir, please.
The Israeli government and its many defenders and informal employees in the United States, of course. And I guess I would just say if that was actually, I don't know how people responded to the poll. I don't know who answered it, but, I believe in measuring reality a little more empirically. And, I don't know anyone in the United States in the last 24 years who's been killed by radical Islam.
Interesting. I will remind y'all that on New Year's Day of 2025, 14 people were slaughtered and several dozen injured in New Orleans when a radical Islamist with an ISIL flag on his vehicle drove through people, killing as many as he could. Had IEDs and explosives in the car. The same kind of radical Islamist attacks that are currently in Europe. Oh, I don't know. There are dozens of terror attacks in the United States. But we got to send the radio crew away for the evening. We're going to continue on the live stream. Don't go anywhere and don't commit fraud while I'm gone, guys. It's the Tony Kinnett Cast here on the Daily Signal. All right, now that the radio crew is out and set to pasture, obviously it's disgusting. Obviously it's ridiculous. Obviously it is the dumbest thing to suggest, as he does in the rest of this particular interview question. Well, there's no threat of Israel. Actually, this is just Republicans in Israel trying to be Islamophobic. It's the same left-wing argument, but I'm going to go one step further. This is major Nepo baby garbage. I grew up in the United States Midwest without using that as a tagline to run for office like Pete Buttigieg does. I grew up in a country that was drastically changed by 9/11 and witnessed firsthand individuals in the Middle East telling me gladly that they would assault my family and spit on my corpse. Thrillingly so. When they commit atrocities, they claim it openly, they celebrate it, they run through the streets giving candy to children. Seen on 9/11 when the people in Gaza ran through the streets handing out candy, saying Allah is good, celebrating 9/11, and all the way since. And of course, you and I both know there are a numerous, in fact, I really don't believe that the number is under 100. I say dozens, but I think that the number is around 112 active confirmed Islamic terror attacks in the United States, not to mention all of those that we've stopped. If you are so desperate to justify the house you purchased in Qatar that you have to tell Americans that they're imagining Islamic terror attacks right after the Bondi shooting, that's pretty embarrassing. Not as embarrassing as Marjorie Taylor Greene finally getting her Strange New Respect article from the New York Times. So the New York Times has now released a brand new cover article on Marjorie Taylor Greene. And it's that strange new respect. As soon as you start to leave the Republican Party and you throw your toys down and you run off, then there's this new strange new respect. Oh, impressive. Maybe we've judged her too harshly. Quote, I was just so naive, end quote, inside Marjorie Taylor Greene's break with Trump. And it's this weird photo shoot, as Jarvis points out over on X. Every awkward New York Times cover article in which they justify really awful behavior includes the individual looking out of their own house window with a sweater on, and true to form, exact same playbook here. I don't know who they think this is advertising to. That's kind of the end point here. When Americans see Islamists in the United States, like the Somali migrant communities, that are openly, proudly committing fraud or gruesome violent acts, whether you're talking about the firebombing in Colorado, whether you're talking about the Bourbon Street massacre in the SUV, whether you're talking about the numerous Islamic attacks that take place, for example, in New York City, whether they be acid attacks, whether they be, of course, just open violent assassinations, whether they be campus takeovers. Americans don't see that and go, well, actually, it could probably just be this totally different thing. You can't really pull the wool over Americans' eyes like that. There might have been a slim time at the outset of social media in which you could have done so. Now, no. because the individuals who have committed those crimes are also on camera openly, proudly, gladly telling you they did it and they'll do it again. So when someone tries to tell you, an American, that, well, you really don't have to, be super concerned because, really it's those Jews that are doing it. That's the real secret. I will once again ask you to remember that every single foreign policy prediction that people like Marjorie Taylor Greene or Tucker Carlson have made over the last couple of months, every single one of those predictions has been wrong. Boldly wrong, ridiculously wrong, silly, pathetic. We make fun of them. And then, of course, we come on the Tony Kinnett cast to point out how ridiculous some of that stuff is because, hey, some of us are right. Because when individuals from Minneapolis get up in front of you and say, the interests of Ilhan Omar are not Ilhan's. The interest of Ilhan Omar is not Minnesota. Ilhan's interests is not the interest of the American people. The interest of Ilhan is that of the Somalian people and Somalia. When you get up in front of people and you say that, when you announce it proudly, and you also have a lot of various crimes associated that are far more impactful to the taxpayer than you stooping your brother. It just so happens that then when some Nepo baby, the son of a CIA officer up in Vermont, fly fishing with Rachel Maddow and making lots of money to then fly around the world to buy a house in Qatar and give lip service of a special kind to any of the Middle Eastern financiers that he can get in front of. It just so happens Americans, they see that. And what you suggest about radical Islamic behavior, when you have the radical Islamists that are bragging about it and admitting to it openly, as soon as Google Translate and other translation services made it a lot easier to put captions on videos shared across social media, it turned things around real quick in a hustle hurry. Now, that aside, one other piece of information that I do want to share with you out of Hennepin County in Minnesota. Hennepin County, Minnesota's proposed budget plan for next year, for 2025, showed that they budgeted over $50 million for the disparity elimination initiatives, including over $10 million for climate and resiliency. It's a 6 times increase in funding from the previous year, literally just to increase a ton of equity measures, like $10.4 million for room, board, weekly maid services, and transportation for illegal immigrants in Brooklyn Center. The fraud's right out there in the open. People are celebrating it. Governor Tim Walz went after the legislative auditor until he's brought before Congress and is then charged and convicted. That stuff's going to continue happening. And this is the real thing that I want to encourage you guys with here at the end. We are starting to reach a bit of a breaking point. Now, I know I didn't talk about the Zelensky and Trump Ukraine stuff or the Netanyahu and Trump stuff. I think that foreign leaders coming to the United States and talking with the president matters very little. It's all a show. The stuff that matters in those meetings is what happens behind closed doors. And I'm going to be honest with you, a lot of times I don't necessarily think that the press need to shove their New York Times nose right up the butt of that private meeting. That is something the chief executive is actually supposed to have constitutional authority over. The real stuff that matters right now is that we are reaching a breaking point, but we will not change course in this country until the individuals that commit these crimes are held accountable and in a public and humiliating fashion. They have to be held accountable, and it cannot be a 5-year stint in prison. It can't. If an individual who allowed this, who encouraged it, who turned a blind eye, if they've been found to do this, they must be tried, and the punishment must be severe, and it must be humiliating. It absolutely must be. There's one clause of the United States framework for the Department of Justice, for our justice system as a whole, that I do not believe was written in the best of language. And that criticism doesn't actually come from me. That actually comes from Second President John Adams. But the idea of there should be no cruel or unusual punishment. I don't think that the way that is now interpreted is how it was meant to be. I mean, the idea of no cruel and unusual punishment realistically meant that you couldn't actively torture a man in the town square and have horses, drag a piece of him every which way and keep him alive for a week, torturing him, that kind of thing. That's the kind of cruel and unusual punishment. But should an individual be hanged for defrauding people of billions of dollars? Yes, absolutely. Should a CEO or a president of a company who knowingly hires and encourages or turns a blind eye at massive illegal hiring practices that undercut the American economy and fuel the slave trade and the human trafficking trade into the United States from the cartels, should that individual be hanged? Yes. At the very least, they should lose their company, be arrested and thrown in prison for a very long time, and be forced to do manual labor. Absolutely. Because why am I paying for them to get a tax-funded timeout? Until individuals who commit these extremely egregious crimes, whether they be sexual in nature, defrauding in billions of dollars, treason to the United States, sedition against the United States, individuals that commit capital level offenses should receive capital level punishments. And until they do, until those who are in the government actually start putting the phones down and start moving toward actual accountability measures that aren't just, we're going to file a lawsuit that this federal judge is going to overturn, and then that's going to be it. As long as we continue to do that, we're going to ring around the rosy until individuals take matters into their own hands. This will continue on until we reach a point of vigilantism. And that's a terrible thing. That's a terrible thing, because then you start getting into the territory of the Book of Judges. And every man did that which was right in his own eyes. In other words, that which you can get away with. And then you get into might makes right. Very, very dangerous stuff. For a constitutional republic to survive, it must be watered routinely with the blood of patriots and tyrants. Not just patriots. We have a lot of people who lay down their lives, both in the military and in our law enforcement, who put themselves in harm's way every single day. Our country's republic is watered. That tree of liberty is watered with the blood of patriots. But we have too few on the local front of the watering with the blood of tyrants. Now, is that bloodthirst? No, it's not supposed to be a spectacle. It's not supposed to be a, hey, everyone, hey, look, come gather around. We're all going to eat popcorn and it's going to be a blast. We're going to watch the hanging, 24/7 pay-per-view. No, it's not fun. It is supposed to be an act of humiliation to that who is committing the crime, so there is no honor in the punishment. And number two, it also functions to remind people real actions have real consequences. And if you do something that steals from the rights of life from others, you might forfeit your right to life. And that's an important thing to grapple with as a society that requires individuals to grow up and take things seriously. Now, just before we kind of close out here, I want to thank Barbara and John Welch joining the show, joining the Daily Signal as new members of the channel. Welcome. Glad you guys are here. We introduced some new emojis, if that's something that floats your boat, in the live stream chat that you guys can use. Also, we're going to have some new videos that are going to come out as members-only exclusives. And then after a day or so, they will be made available to the rest. Again, it's really just a matter of showing support. We don't ask you guys to give donations to the channel. Winter, who's a good friend of the show, gave $10 this evening saying, Walls is so corrupt. I agree wholeheartedly, clearly, absolutely. So we really do thank you guys very kindly for the donations. You do not have to do that. Please don't think you have to. But I do want to encourage you guys that if you do so, we're trying to make that worth the donation on the membership side of things, even if we do accidentally forget to name something here, there, and everywhere a little bit every once in a while. That said, we will wrap things up here, I think, for today. We've had a Somali fraud heavy kind of a day. I've got a cardboard box on the inside. I'm going to try to get registered as a charity and raise a little extra moolah. What you can do in the meantime, keep an eye out. You see a center nearby that looks kind of weird, looks kind of strange? Look up their business record documents. Don't go inside and harass the staff or put yourself in danger of, getting in a castle law situation. Look up the business records. And if you see something, say something. Flag law enforcement. That's a great start. That's what people are doing in Washington State and in Ohio. Guarantee it's happening elsewhere. It's soon to happen in New York City. That said, I'm Tony Kinnett, and this is the Daily Signal's Tony Kinnett Cast, syndicated nationally, first on 93 WIBC. Take care.